and talk about what is this thing called Yom Yerushalayim and Shavuos have in common, and what can they teach us about psychology. And they actually have a lot to teach us.
What a treat.
What a switch. Okay. So first of all, you just mentioned that it's also Shmuel Navi's Yortzeit.
Today?
Tomorrow. 28th of Iyar is Shmuel Hanavi's Yortzeit, his day of passing. And he's actually Yom Yerushalayim. Why? So, if you just think about it a little bit, why do we even know about Yerushalayim? We know about Yerushalayim because of Shmuel. It's a very strange thing. We wouldn't think that. We would think that the Tanakh is full of Yerushalayim. But it wasn't full of Yerushalayim, at least not in the capacity that he wanted it, until Shmuel came along. And if we might say that we ask the question a lot of times, because we have this thing, this verse that we read every Erev Shabbos in the Tehillim that we say in Kabbalat Shabbat. One of the verses is Moshe v'Aaron b'Chohanav u'Shmuel b'Korei Shmo. That Moshe and Aaron are his priests, and Shmuel is the one who calls his name. And from this, the sages say that Shmuel is equal to Moshe and Aaron. What did Shmuel do that he's so equal to Moshe and Aaron? He's a Navi, he didn't bring down Torah. So the reason that Shmuel is apparently equated with Moshe and Aaron is that Moshe and Aaron brought down, one might say, the Torah, and they took the first step in creating Am Yisrael, in creating the Jewish people. But it was only the first step. So we talked about this last week. If you remember, that our order is backwards. We start from first we had the Torah, then the people were created, and finally there's a land. So if you look at this, how do we understand this? That Moshe and Aaron, they did the first step. They brought the Torah. And they also took the first step, they did, let's call it a half of the second step of creating a people. But then they weren't able to bring the people into Eretz Yisrael, into the land of Israel. Yeshua did. But then it took another 400 years until the people really became a people. Because we talked about this, that the normal developmental process of the people is that you start from having tribes. Well, first you have families, then you have tribes, and then eventually, if the conditions allow for it, and the geography allows for it, and all kinds of other things fall into play, then you get a people. But for that to happen, you have to have a land. You can't get a people without a land. So even the process of congealing the Jewish people when they came out of Egypt was not complete until they came into the land. And, most importantly, they stopped being tribal. Now, they didn't really stop being tribal in the sense that people knew which tribe they belonged to, and the tribes, to some extent, still had their inherited lands, but what Shmuel did was he stopped the tribalism. He took the tribalism, I think I mentioned this last week because it was for sort of a build-up to today, that tribalism is a primitive form of, call it political government. It's one of the worst forms because you can't really get people to cooperate. It's one of the reasons why we're able to survive here in Eretz Yisrael, because the Arabs are completely tribal. They have no ability or even... They have not developed to the place where they look at themselves and they say, we should be a people. Now, they keep saying this, but thankfully in practice, they have no such political intelligence. Luckily for us. Because otherwise, a long time ago, we would have had much bigger problems. So we're facing most of the time just tribal warfare. We're fighting one city at a time. We're not really fighting them all at the same time. Now they could all gang on us together, but even then they're not coordinated. It's very hard for them to coordinate. The reason is because tribalism is normally associated with internal hatred between the different groups. So they don't really work together. They can't coordinate. And the truth is that when you look at the United States, for instance, so you could have had tribalism, each commonwealth or each original colony could have been, but then you had a few people who had enough foresight and enough education to create a political atmosphere where they decided that creating a federation is bigger and more important than remaining colonies, and they struck a balance between the two. Now this balance is still, whenever you look at the United States and you see that things don't work, that's where the kink in the whole system is. It's in this interface between the state governments and the federal government, because it's fine. In the end, you have the whole power of the United States behind the army. It's not like there's an army from this colony to this colony and so on, which comes and tells you the right to bear arms. I think that's the First Amendment or the Second Amendment. And what does that mean? State militias. That's really what it means. It means that you could still have a lot of inner problems. So anyway, so Shmuel saw this. Shmuel, we said, was born at the very dusk of the tribal period, but the tribal period would not have been superseded by monarchy if it wasn't for Shmuel. Shmuel was the one who had foresight. And interestingly, we already find that his mother had this foresight. And even his mother and father are like the father and mother of the monarchy. Why do I say that? Because in her prayer, Chana, his mother, she prays, Zera Moshe Chanashim. What does that mean? I want to have an offspring, a child who will anoint kings. So, I mean, I was reading some stuff today just to see what people had to say about this. And the only thing, it's so, why people feel so uninspired, I have no idea. But the only thing they could come up with is that this is obviously anachronistic. There's no way in the world that Chana would have thought about monarchy because there was no monarchy yet. So, it must be that this was composed, this prayer of Chana must have been composed much later and then inserted here because it made sense. So, I don't know how people think. It's really weird. There's a mitzvah in the Torah to appoint a king. And they knew that this is one of the most important things. And people who thought about this, how many people even today, we'll talk about this, but we're in a transitionary period, how many people today really think all day long about what does the Torah say that can solve our problems? But Elkanah and Chana's home was exactly that type of home where that's what they were thinking about. Because they were trying to do two things. Elkanah himself, how did Shmuel end up in Shiloh in the first place? Because in the Mishkan, because Elkanah every year, 3 times a year, actually 4 times a year, the Gemara says, would make a pilgrimage to Shiloh, and he would encourage people to come with him. Elkanah was a prophet also. There's a prophet who comes to Eli, the high priest at the time, after Shmuel's already there, and he's not named, but Chazal say this was Elkanah, and he tells him about his impending death, and that because he wasn't able to keep his children in check, and they are corrupt, that this is the end of his lineage, that nothing will remain from him. So Elkanah is like the one who gives the final blow to tribalism and the Mishkan, and Chana is the one who sees forward, and this is very fitting because that's exactly like how we would expect it, that the father has the duty of cementing or dealing with the past, and the mother has the duty of dealing with the future. So they were thinking about, how do we transition? How do we move from this to that? So they brought up Shmuel, even though Shmuel was being raised in Shiloh in the Mishkan. They were his parents, and they talked to him and they explained to him, and he knew this. And because he was very dedicated to Eli, so he didn't maybe talk about it all day long, or maybe not at all, and because he knew it would upset him and so on. But he had this in his mind. And so Shmuel ushers in the monarchic period, but more importantly than that, for our purposes, he designates Yerushalayim as the capital. He understands that these two mitzvahs go together. The mitzvah to appoint a king, and the mitzvah to find a permanent residence for Hashem. In that sense, what Shmuel did was he finished the process. He forged the people because he created the monarchy, and he connected them to the land, finally, fully, by creating a center. In order for people to a land, you have to have a center. You have to have a capital. You have to have something that everybody turns to. It can't just be that there will be only to have a capital for everything together. And that's what he did.
In the Torah.
No, it's mentioned, of course, but it's never mentioned as this is the place that you should build the temple. This is the place for the Beis HaMikdash. It only says, "Hamakom asher yivchar Hashem Elokecha mikol shvatecha, elav tidrushu nuvat Hashama."
Which means?
The place that God will choose from among all your tribes, that's where you will go, and that's what you will seek and go there.
And Shmuel?
Shmuel was the one who decided that this was Har Moriah.
It was in the Nevuah?
Is it a nevuah? Very good question. No.
No.
Chazal say that it's not a nevuah. It's a decision. Now, after they obviously there was some history to this place. They didn't choose this place by mistake. So, on the one hand, there is the choice of Har Moriah, of Mount Moriah, as the place for Beit HaMikdash, and there's a lot of reasons for that, because there was a long tradition about all the events that had happened in this place. But what really cemented it in the end was that David decided to build his capital underneath Har Moriah, not above it. Right? He builds it. Anybody who's been to Ir David, the David city, knows that there's the mountain, and then there's a long branch of the mountain that falls down, and that's where David's city is. So he built it underneath.
Did Shmuel's decision?
No, it was all because of Shmuel's decision. David would never have been either king or known where his capital would be without Shmuel. So Shmuel created Yerushalayim. In the end, it's very fitting that this is the day. I know that this is seems like this is the first thing that should be taught about Yom Yerushalayim, is that if you want to know about Yerushalayim, so you ask, why is this on the 28th of Iyar? So I'm not a very big fan of the 6-Day War and what its aftermath was, because I think it was horrendous. The Rebbe said to throw all the Arabs out. Nobody listened to him. So I'm not a big fan of the aftermath. But when I come and ask, so what day on the calendar is most fitting to call the day of Yerushalayim, I still come up with 28th of Iyar.
Unbelievable.
So then somebody who's a big believer in divine providence comes and says, you see, I know, it was a big deal. But the aftermath sort of made it all fizzle out.
It kind of is like a chesed, like we don't need it.
Right, it's always, right, it's a chesed. It's in general a chesed because unfortunately there's no demand, there's no elav tidreshun, there's no seeking of it. There's no attempt to seek this place. And usually, by the way, this is something that unfortunately, I say it like this, at some age you stop going to Disney World. Why? Because after 20, 21, 22, maybe you can stretch it till 25. You're like, if I go, it's only for my children. This is not appealing to me. There's nothing here for me. Right? I hope. 99% of adults, I hope, won't go there. Certainly people who have something better to do won't go there. Certainly won't waste their money on it. What for?
Oh my gosh, it's you can't afford it.
That's another part.
It's the last time I looked, which was before I made Aliyah, it was $150 for children.
Admission per day.
Yeah, and my nephew he has a it's horrendous.
Well, they have to prop up their stock price. In any case, so the problem with Yom Yerushalayim is it has nothing to offer adults. Why does it have nothing to offer adults? Because adults don't understand. No, I think this is poorly explained what the significance of Yerushalayim for an adult is. The more you mature, the more interested you become in the political side of life. And what I mean by political side of life is the connection between people. How do you create unity? How do you create things that we can all stand behind? How do you create things that have significance in our adult lives? And if you don't understand that Yerushalayim is not just a holy place, if you don't understand the political value, if you don't understand that you cannot create a nation without a capital, if you don't understand these things, if you don't understand all this, it's okay to go back to Washington, D.C. and see how it was constructed. There's a lot of smart people there. And they constructed it in a certain way that would meet the demands of a very advanced civilization. And when you think about Yerushalayim, you have to think about it the same way. You can't think about it as just, again, this is what David was doing. This is what Shmuel taught him. Shmuel was a great statesman. And he taught David that when you think about Yerushalayim, you don't think about your capital. You think about the capital of a civilization. That's how you need to think about it. So it's not just for you, it's for the entire region. Now, adults want to meet other adults. They don't go for the rides. They want to meet, dialogue, and have conversations that have meaning and so on. Yerushalayim is nothing of that today. It's absolutely nothing of that. Why? Because it's like something that they hold on to without even knowing why. Because, well, they have sort of a reason, because every Jew has a connection to Yerushalayim, but it's not a living connection in that sense. It's just either you live here or you don't. And otherwise you have some vague historical, religious, spiritual feeling associated with it. But that's not how you create a capital. That's not how you create a capital, a center of a civilization. To do that, you have to be much more sophisticated. And that is what Shmuel and David began to do. But they didn't finish. There was a lot of work to do. I mean, you can't do this over even one generation. This is something that takes generations.
You mean in the structure, in the functioning?
Everything.
What did they do that contributes to that?
Everything. Everything they did was to, in the same way that Washington, D.C. is built to be the greatest home team advantage in a playing field that you can have, Yerushalayim was built by them in such a way that this would be the greatest monument to God in all respects. Meaning that regardless of who you were and what you believed and what it was, you came to Yerushalayim, you came as let's say a foreign dignitary, emissary, whatever you were, an ambassador. You came to the lower city, they probably to the where they had the pools there down on the bottom, and then you'd slowly make your way up to David's palace, to the royal palace, and the royal palace was about 2/3 of the way up. And then they take you into the Har HaBayit, into what they had built, and as a non-Jew you couldn't go all the way in, but it's even built that way. If people notice this, when you come from the south, you enter through these They're called Sharei Chulda. You enter like a mouse. It's called the Chulda, is a rat. So you go underneath, and then you suddenly hit the open area, and then you would climb a few more stories, 2 or 3 stories, and you could look at the Beis HaMikdash from that viewing area. So the whole feeling was one of ascent, incredible ascent. And it's a hard ascent. It's not like, when you think about what David wasn't smart enough to go and build his palace where Har Tzion is today. Har Tzion is the flat area. It's higher though than Har HaMoriah. So the reason he built it on that projection of the mountain and going down is because that was the feeling they wanted to give. That we here serve Hashem. What they did was incredible, and you think about it, how more difficult was it? I've never seen a single archaeologist ask this question. Nobody knew for 400 years, where in the world the royal palace was in Jerusalem. I don't think anybody knew. In the Second Temple, I don't think they even knew where it was. Maybe they did. But let's say for 2,000 years, nobody knew where it was.
David's palace.
Yeah, the royal palace. This was the royal palace of all the Davidic kings.
The Beis HaMikdash was the royal palace?
No, the Beis HaMikdash is the Beis HaMikdash. And 1/3 the way down. Why? Why would you do that? When you have perfectly flat space, just to the north of it, plenty of. Why would you build something on the side of a mountain and with all the problems that gives you? Because they had a reason. I don't know if this is the reason, but when I look at it and I ask, so why would I do this? So the answer is because I want to give everyone the feeling that we're going up to Hashem's house. Hashem is high. That's the idea. So David and Shmuel, they made this reality. So the best day in the year to celebrate Yom Yerushalayim, to start thinking about how do I make Yerushalayim into the center of civilization, is the 28th of Iyar. There's his Yortzeit, because he's the one who dreamt this up. And again, it wasn't a prophecy. Later, there were other prophecies that justified the choice of the location. And again, there was a previous history that also justified it. But there were other options. Shaul, for instance, did not agree with Shmuel. And that's why he didn't even get into the business of building the Beis HaMikdash. Shaul thought that the Beis HaMikdash should be where today, if you know, there's a small mountain in between Givat Shaul and Ramot. It's called Mitzpeh Naftuach. That's what it's called today. But there's a small mountain that fits a lot of the criteria that the Torah gives. And he thought that it should be there. His house was very close. Actually, Shmuel's house was also very close. But in the end, Shmuel said, no, this is not the right place. Because it does lack the history. It does lack the important history. In any case. So, that's about Yom Yerushalayim. So now let's take this to psychology. What does this have to do with psychology? So first of all, there's a lot of psychology that goes into buildings and cities, and these are things that you have to think about, and we talked a little bit about that. But the real reason that this is important for us is because what Shmuel saw was the crumbling of the tribal, let's call it government, whatever it was, the tribal politics. He saw all the terrible things happen. First of all, he saw the corruption in the Mishkan. The Mishkan was the center of religious life, but because Shmuel's not from the tribe of Binyamin, where Shiloh is. And his father, Elkanah, is not, and he's a Frati, he's from Ephraim, a completely different direction. And they had to work really hard to get people to come. It wasn't, with tribalism, you can't really make a center, because every single tribe will say, that's your center. I'm not interested. When Shmuel chose Yerushalayim, by the way, one of the reasons was because this was an area that had never been divided up between the tribes. Why was it not divided up between the tribes? So there is an incredible story that the Torah says that it was because Moshe Rabbeinu gave it to Yitro. That mountain was given to Yitro. A strange thing. Yitro was a priest, but to Avodah Zarah. But when he converted, Moshe Rabbeinu said, here's an opportunity to do something. And you can say again, this is Shmuel taking on Moshe's already foresight and saying, we need an area that nobody will be able to say is mine or yours. We need that. Because if we're going to build a capital, which is exactly the same thing as Washington, D.C., it's not in Maryland, it's not in Virginia. Now there, I think they apportioned the land. They appropriated it. Because I think it did belong to one or the other. And then they cut it off from them. And they cut it off very neatly. Like it has 3 straight edges. And they cut it off because they said, Virginia can't claim it and Maryland can't claim it. Here, either they cut it off after the fact, but according to Chazal, it was cut off from the beginning. They never divided this land. So, that's another point about it. But Shmuel saw everything deteriorating. He saw it falling apart. And when you see things falling apart, you have to change paradigms. That's the point that we want to learn from him. That there comes a certain point in the development of humanity, of a people, of a person, whatever it is, where you have to say, I have to create a paradigm shift. I can't continue with the old structures. They just don't work. They don't hold anything anymore. If a child is not willing to switch at age 6 from playing in the playground and playing games and whatever and sitting in class, so you've got a problem, because this old thing about playing games is just not going to work because you have to acquire some knowledge. So you have to switch the paradigm about what you do with your time. You have to switch it. And then at some point, he's used to being punished if he didn't do his homework, and he's used to being scolded if he didn't come on time, and getting this, and maybe today they don't do this, so they do the opposite. He's supposed to get rewards and prizes if he does, and so on. And then you hit the end of high school, and you suddenly realize that nobody is going to care anymore whether I come. It's my problem. And if you don't create that paradigm shift from one to the other, you'll never succeed. Trying to continue the same thing, looking for someone who's going to scold me and somebody who's going to... The same thing happens in the development of the people. If you try to continue the tribalism too long, you start getting the end stage maladies, which are civil war. They had a terrible civil war where everybody attacked Binyamin, and they actually wanted to kick them out of the Jewish people. And then they had failed wars with the Philistines, to the point where they didn't even understand what they were supposed to do with the tabernacle. So they took the Aron and they took it to war. Maybe you take the trumpets to war. You don't take the Aron to war. There's an Aron that you can take. So there's a whole discussion about which one they took. In the end, they did the wrong thing. The Aron was captured and spent 7 months by the Philistines. So everything was falling apart. It was clearly falling apart. This is not going to last. So he had to create a paradigm shift. Now, when you create a paradigm shift, you can't continue using the old tools. They just don't work. So you first of all have to change the whole understanding of what things are about, and then tools are slowly formed. And it's a very perilous period of time, because you don't have any governmental, let's call it bureaucracy, in place to deal with a monarchy instead of a tribal society. So it's very, very difficult to work then. But tools eventually are created. It just takes time. The reason that Shmuel and David were successful was because the old system completely failed. By the way, David for 7 years was only the king of Judah. He wasn't the king of the entire people. It took them 7 years to come to him. Out of these 2 years were with after Shaul. Shaul was king for 2 years. He was king for 7 years before they came to him. But they wanted to retain tribalism. Even his tribe did not yet understand the vision. They didn't get it yet. But eventually, everybody fell in, and they agreed to it. Then, unfortunately, years, a little bit more, but after, let's say, 70 years, the whole thing fell apart again, and there were 2 kingdoms. But notice that the second, that this is the right model. They just couldn't deal with Yehuda for some reason. They had a problem there. So what does this mean about people? That you can only carry your paradigm of life so far. And at some point you have to exchange it for something new. You have to. The same thing is true by the individual, the same thing is true by the society, and the same thing is true by a whole area of knowledge called psychology. What does psychology do today? So that's why we started talking about character development in the first place, because we read this critique, we read a number of critiques about the whole direction that psychology is supposed to heal someone. That there's some kind of magical tool that you'll use that will heal somebody. And what we know after 70, 80 years of trying this is that there's no such tool. Nobody's been able to find one. And therapy works just as good as friends. They're just as useful. If you have a good friend, it's like having therapy. It's the same usefulness. So the question becomes, so how do people change? How do people get rid of their problems? And so character development, this whole idea of positive psychology, is coming and saying, well, you can't really change the person. You have to help them develop character to cope with what they have. Or develop character to proactively prevent them from getting to where they are. But the real idea is that you have to go through some kind of paradigm shift. The person has to start thinking about the world differently. That's what really positive psychology is about. I'm trying to change the way you look at things. If I can change the way you look at things, the tools will be found anyway. You'll figure out how to live your life better anyway. I don't have to help you with that. When we talk about Jewish psychology, we're even pushing that even further. We're coming and saying, and here, this is the really important part. Everything until now was just an introduction to this. That with the trying to heal the animal soul is a lost cause. You can't. The animal soul is what gets you into trouble, and you can give all the tools in the world that you want. I come into my home and I'm angry because my wife didn't... Okay, let's teach you about anger management. Let's teach you about... what else would they teach me? Let's go to couples therapy. Let's learn how to argue. In the end, okay, have an amicable divorce. These are all tools for the animal soul, and they fit the animal soul. And any tool that you use in the middle, it doesn't matter what it is. Any kind of therapy that you go to, any kind of AMDR if you want, whatever you do, right? It's called AMDR.
EMDR?
Yeah. Anything you want, any new fad, doesn't matter. They all do one thing. They talk to the animal soul. They're trying to put the animal soul at rest and give it what it wants. And the problem is that you can never satisfy the animal soul. There's no end to it. The person always needs to be stroked, always needs to be the center of attention, always needs to get what they want. It's just how it is. That's the animal soul. That's how it lives. So again, you can teach it, okay, Give up 40%, 50%, 60%. Give up, give some more to the other side. But that's all it does. That's all you can, in the end, convince even the most developed, mature person to do. Because that's the nature of the animal soul. That's what you do. Obviously, we're talking also about the intellectual soul, because we're also talking about speaking to the person and encouraging them and teaching them and convincing them and so on. And this all is very nice and good, but in the end, you're still stuck in the same paradigm. The paradigm is that all I have is my animal soul, and to live life well, it's all a series of compromises. That's what it is. If you happen to have won the lottery and you live with a wife who is as nice as you are, so you can give and take as much as you can, and you have a pretty good, decent life. If you haven't even won the jackpot, so you also are deeply, madly in love for 80 years, I don't know what that means, and it's even better than that. It's a Garden of Eden at home. It's paradise. But that's the only option. With your children, what do parents expect from their children? Everything. They're supposed to be the updated version of myself. I'm supposed to control them so that they do what I tell them to do, and so on. And you create these relationships that stand no chance in the real world, that have no recognition, true recognition of the value of each individual life, because in the end we're all dealing with the same things, and I know what the problems of the world are, and if you don't listen to me, you're going to suffer from them, and in the end you're going to come running back to me, and you're going to tell me to take care of your problems, and I don't want to do that. So if you don't, as a 25-year-old, clean up your act and do what I tell you to do, so you're off my inheritance, that's it. Those are the options. What can you do? Because what are you dealing with? I mean, I'm caricaturing the whole thing, but in the end, the animal soul is very, very hard to placate.
So what about the rectification of the ego?
Right? So hold on, we'll get to that. But let's take another step. This same problem is not just between parents and children, and parents and themselves. It's also between the person and himself. You go deeper into the person, and every person is a mess. Because what's my purpose? How do I get what I want? How much do I have to suffer? All these questions, which are endless, and there's no tool that will help you solve this. You can't find a tool. So people come and say, give me better tools. I say, I can't give you a better tool, because the light that's going to go into this vessel, this tool that I'm giving you, is still the same light. So if the light is a light of expectations, it's a light of what has the world done for me lately, how much I deserve, and so on, what am I entitled to? So there's no tool that's going to be able to help the person live a decent life this way. There's simply no tool. It doesn't matter what I give them. So I start giving them drugs instead to sort of make them foggy, so that they don't know exactly what's going on. This is what most of the drugs do, which is fine. Okay, I anesthetize them so that they don't suffer so much. And it's the same type of anesthetic that you give somebody who's in physical pain. You give someone who's in spiritual pain or psychological pain. So that's what we have. So says Shmuel, if our paradigm is one of tribalism, it's not going to help if I strengthen the Mishkan, the tabernacle, because still people are not going to come. It's not going to help if I appoint a new high priest. He can't be the high priest because he's from Ephraim. You can't find someone and appoint him, and now this will be the new high priest and everything will be fine. This has run its course already. It's finished. There's no point in finding new tools for it. What I need to do is find a new light. I need to find a new light source. And this light source, you're right, unfortunately right now it has no tools, but it's a much better light source, and over time the tools will be built. And that's exactly what he did. He said, instead of, and let's look at the idea of the geography again, that instead of trying to work better to improve the functioning of the animal soul, I come and say there's a different soul altogether. There's a higher soul, which is called the divine soul. And the moment you are willing to work with that, the moment you're willing to switch the lights off on the animal soul and turn the new energy source on from the divine soul, it's a different paradigm. Everything is now different. And that's his idea. So I need to switch where the energy is coming from. It's no longer going to come from the Mishkan. It's no longer going to come from this, whatever, tribal relationships that we have. It's not going to come from there. It has to come from a whole new idea. And that's what he does. So when we talk about Jewish psychology, Torah psychology, what we're saying is pretty much the same thing. Dealing with the animal soul and finding more tools for it, more, like the Hebrews would say, shitot. What would you say in English? Like different modalities, different therapies, all these things. They're not going to change the fact that in the end you're working with the animal soul. If you don't change the focus to the divine soul, then you're rehashing the same possibilities over and over in different ways. And from time to time it actually works, because people are thankfully have a lot of healing within them. And so when they have friends and things happen, but it doesn't always work. Usually it doesn't. And people are still in angst and suffering. So comes this idea, let's move to the divine soul. And if we move to the divine soul, everything it's a completely different picture. Now, you can't just move there if it doesn't exist. You can't just say, okay, let's talk about the fact that really inside what you want to do is serve your mission in life. And your mission in life is not the same thing as your survival. It's something different. In fact, you're willing to sacrifice your survival for the true mission. Sacrifice many things for your true mission. Raising children is not some kind of physical decree. Obviously today it's not at all anymore because there's birth control. So having children and raising them is part of my mission. I do it from a completely different place. It's no longer to preserve the species. I don't know if anybody even thinks about that. Like, I find it hard to believe that somebody would. Maybe there's some primitive places that they do. But even the most primitive places, I don't think they think that anymore. So what is it about? So somebody says, oh, it's about preserving me. And then you get into the problems of the animal soul. So it's not about that. It's not about preserving me or you or the species or anything. It's about part of what Hashem wants from me. And why does he want this? Because he wants to give, and then we have a whole new paradigm. He wants to give another soul an opportunity to live in this world and to serve him, which is the most precious thing that you can give someone. The most precious thing. And any time that they have in this world is more precious than anything else you give. So you're willing to give up your survival. Right here, I'm not going to die from it, hopefully, but it's a lot of sacrifice, and I'm willing to sacrifice this in order to be able to fulfill my mission in life. And the moment you start talking about mission in life, and the moment you start talking about mission of the divine soul, the higher mission, higher calling, then the whole psychology changes. Everything changes. And then it almost doesn't matter what tools you're going to bring. There are going to be new tools, but they don't really matter. because this source of energy in the psyche is able to sustain life in a different way, entirely differently. So it doesn't mean that you don't have ups and downs. We talked a lot about the ups and downs. So you asked about rectifying the ego. So we said the ups and downs are because we have an ego also. We're not taking the animal soul behind the shed and shooting it. That's not what we're doing. We're coming and saying, I need the animal soul because it has a lot of good uses, but only if it's under the divine soul, only if I'm able to situate it properly, to give it its proper place, its proper level of importance. If I can't do that, then the animal soul is going to take over. So what we call rectifying the ego is coming and saying, let's put the ego in context. And the context is it needs to serve the divine soul. If you can do that, then suddenly, even having tribes has meaning. Because now it's not about how we survive anymore, because the survival is not left to the animal soul / tribes. The survival is now the duty, meaning the life. Let's not call it survival anymore. The life is now granted, the decisions that affect life are now granted to the divine soul. And we come and say the lower parts also have a function. So what is the function of tribes after you build a monarchy? What was the function of the tribes?
To serve the monarchy.
Yeah, but how did they do that? Now they have a place. What's their place? Their place is that they become like what today we call the taboo.
What?
Taboo, where the land authority. The tribes are how you manage the land. It's got nothing to do with making bigger decisions anymore. But because it's not like today that you have a computerized, digitized picture of all the land and you can keep everything stored and so on. But back then, the only way you could do this was by actually having people on the ground marking off plots. So you had to deal with the people that lived there. There was no other way. So they have a role. They have a very important role. Without them, I don't know how to distribute the land. I don't know how to take taxes. I don't know how to do anything because I need the people there. So I have room and I have a need for the tribes now, but they don't serve the same function. In order to preserve this, they also made something very interesting. They said that there would be like a census of all the tribes, and every tribe would send every so often, depending on how many people they had, would send a group to the Beis HaMikdash, to the temple, that would be there for a week, and they would also have part of the duties in the Beis HaMikdash to do this, to do that, and they had all kinds of... And so you created this whole system where the tribes mean something, but they don't mean what they used to mean. They used to be small governmental pieces. Now they're not self-government anymore. That's gone. You also need a whole system of courts. So the tribes are not bad for that. You can also do that. If you choose to live in the area of one tribe, okay, so it's the same thing as a local court. There's also a Sanhedrin. And so if you don't like what they said in the lower court, you go up to the higher court. And so eventually the courts also move to Yerushalayim. Everything gravitates toward the center. And people say, oh, that's terrible. How can you take away our personal privilege and so on? This is because they can't administrate a civilization any other way. That's the only way you can do it. The same thing is true by us. That when the paradigm shift happens, so it used to be that I judged everything based on my animal soul. Now I'm judging it according to my divine soul. And those are the questions I have to be asking. If I don't know what questions to ask of the divine soul, so I fall back down to the level of the tribal courts and these smaller questions of the animal soul. So I have to know so what's the main question that the divine soul is constantly asking? What's it asking? What's my mission in life? If I don't know that, the animal soul knows what its mission in life is. eat as much as you can, get as much as you can, possess whatever you can, enjoy as much as you can. So it knows, but it's generic. It's the same for everyone. So actually, individualism actually only starts when you get to the divine soul. Then you begin to talk really about and be able to appreciate the individuality of each individual. Now this is a very important part because vessels are always the same. Think about this. For women, I think it's clothes, right? That you don't want to be seen at an event with someone who's wearing the same thing. But in the end, I don't know if today that problem still exists. But let's say 50 years ago, it definitely existed because how many dresses could people make? So they pretty much made the same thing over and over again. Today there's so many options. Okay, it won't happen. But if you want to be an individual, you can't be an individual with your car because there's only so many. Even though in America I think they have like a million thousand different models and colors, whatever, and now they have these. You can order the colors that you want or whatever. But all this is all to say that in the end, all the vessels are the same. Vessels are never different. Everybody wears clothing, everybody has watches, everybody has shoes, everybody has a house, everybody has a car. Everything is the same in the vessels. When you go to a psychologist, so this guy uses this modality, so he uses the same thing for everyone. The vessels are always the same. What is different, what actually allows people to be different, to find their individuality, is when you switch to the light, to the source of energy, which is, again, the divine soul, to Yerushalayim. When you switch to Yerushalayim, suddenly you become an individual. The tools will come later. There will be tools, and they will, again, be the same for everyone. The higher source of my psychological existence, then I'm really an individual. And my life has particular meaning. Otherwise, it's all the same. We all need food. We all need shelter. We all need to sleep. We all need to shower. It's all the same. But the question is not those things which people spend their lives pursuing, and instead the question becomes, so what do you do with these things? How do you use them? What are you going to use them for? What's your goal? And so we spend a lot of time on faith and confidence because that's exactly what needs to be focused on. What in the end am I supposed to do with my life? What is my purpose? And that doesn't come from the animal soul. It simply does not, because the animal souls are all the same. They all need the same things with slight variations. So what David and Shmuel really did was, even though you might think of it as being more centralized authority, it actually does the opposite. And so what happened in Yerushalayim? Something that didn't happen in the Mishkan. And actually, I wanted to actually read this to you, but I should read something if I already brought the Tanakh. You have to read this incredible, I think this thing is missed. People don't fully understand what this is saying. When Shmuel comes to live there in Shiloh, in the tabernacle, here's the verse. This is 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 1. I'll read it in Hebrew first and then in English. והנער שמואל משרת את השם לפני עלי, ודבר השם היה יקר בימים ההם, אין חזון נפרץ. Translation, the letter Eli, the high priest, the word of Hashem was scarce in those days. Vision, chazon is another word for prophecy. Prophecy, vision was. He's saying that Shmuel also saw this, that people have no visions. I mean, they have no plan for their lives. They don't know what they want to do. Because tribalism, as much as you think that this is like, oh, this is the This is the ultimate way to be free and to pursue my purpose. He says, no, because you're all focused on the same thing. So, okay, I understand. So you want your house to be this way, and he wants his house to be that way. In the end, it's a house. What did you do differently, really? That's all animal soul. It says the Mishkan was not able to give people the feeling that they have a purpose in life, that they have something that they really need to pursue. They had no vision. If you remember, when we talked about faith and confidence, the thing that we said you start with all the time is with vision. You have to have a vision of what you want, a vision of faith, of what you believe in, and what the purpose of your life is. And that's what you pursue. So it's saying an incredible thing. I've never heard anybody explain this verse this way, but I think it's mamish the pshat. Why do I care if Shmuel was special or not special? Because this is the motivator behind, this is what's driving Shmuel in his attempt to create a centralized monarchy. Because it says, if I don't create a centralized monarchy, if I don't create a capital city that everybody will come to, and in that capital city will be the Beis HaMikdash, which is the source of all the visions, where you go to receive the vision, then we're going to become a nation of farmers, of very simple people. There's nothing wrong with being a farmer if you have a vision about what you want to do as a farmer. But if all you want to do is just survive, and you're a farmer to survive, and you're very happy, and it's called Ish Tachat Gafno V'Tachat Teinoto, something that repeats so many times in the book of Judges, and then the beginning, in the beginning of Joshua, at the end of Joshua, under his under his vine, under his fig. What does that mean? That you look like this all I see. I see my vine, I see my fig, I'm very happy, that's it.
No vision.
No vision. That's all you can see. And this all comes from getting very comfortable with your animal soul, which tribalism is great for. And don't bother me about anything bigger, and there's no bigger problems in the world, and we don't really have to solve anything. And the whole legacy of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov is gone. It's down the drain, because what did they want to do? They wanted to fix the world. And here come their offspring, who finally made it out of Egypt, and finally made it into Eretz Yisrael, and finally are living here. And the only thing they want to do is, okay, so where's my next apartment? We are living in exactly the same time. This is what interests people today. This is all they have on their minds. 95% of the population, all it has on their minds is, so where's my job? Where do I buy my apartment? And everything's good, and that's it. I want a better parking spot. There's nothing, there's no vision there.
But the throne population also.
Same thing, no difference.
Right.
They also have figs and vines.
So why are people having all these demonstrations if they're not interested in other things?
They're the only ones who actually care about something. It's scary. The only ones that really care about something right now are the people who created the situation in which, really, what are they saying? I want you to do, somebody gave a very good example of this. He said they treat the common authority, meaning the state of Israel right now, but whatever we have is our common umbrella, like it's a business. And they say, if the business, let's say you're a drug company, and you put out a drug, and it turned out that this drug was fatal to 800 people, and they're now each suing for $20 million. And if the court approves this, the drug company will go bankrupt. That's how they're treating our umbrella right now. They're saying, what's commonly holding us together is nothing more than a company. You gave false pretenses, and you caused 30 people, 40 people, 100 people, doesn't matter what it is. You caused them to die. You have to pay whatever there is, including making the whole country go bankrupt, in order to save them. That's your contract with them, because it's like a commercial contract. You took the responsibility, you gave them the drug is called living where they lived, and this is what happened to them, it's your responsibility. So now the price might be that everybody will go under. But what can we do? That's how you do business. That's how they see it. So what they're really trying to do is they don't have a vision. They're trying to preserve what they built. In their this is what we talk about the state of Israel being from the very beginning. It's a survival authority. It's not anything more. It was meant to give people the chance to live under their fig and under their vine. That's what it was meant for in the beginning, to get respite from 2,000 years of exile. I don't want to have to go anymore. I don't want to have to move. I don't want to be persecuted. I don't want this one. I want quiet, peace and quiet. But what is that? That is exactly the animal soul.
Is that why, like, say, in 2005, I think it was, when we gave land back, even against the way it was saying also, that is because we're just thinking, like, what made them think that there would be peace by giving land back?
They don't think there will be peace, they're hoping. Because their only instinct is, how do I make my life more comfortable? They don't see life as having to find a vision and pursuing that vision. They say, no, being a farmer is exactly what he wants his house to be this way, and that is the epitome of being a human being. Mm-hmm. And we come and say that is the epitome of being a human being from the point of view of the animal soul. And that gets you into a lot of trouble. And until you don't shift the paradigm and you begin to ask, so what does the divine soul say? Then you'll not be sitting under your vine and your fig. What you're going to find out is that the Philistines are coming to kill you. Because they're not, for them, their purpose, they're to kill you. That's what they want. That's all they're interested in. That for them is sitting under their vine and their fig.
Right, at least now.
That's what they want. You ask, what, they don't want to sit like me under a real vine that they killed today? That's what it means. The more, the merrier. The more complacent they are, the more calm they are. It calms them down. Whatever, who knows what it does to them. It's not you. It's a different state of mind altogether. What we're saying is, if you don't shift the paradigm, if you don't, and the paradigm is going to shift at some point, meaning we're going to see this paradigm shift. It's happening in psychology. It'll happen also in politics. It'll happen also at the greater grand scale of what is the reason for being here in Eretz Yisrael. That's not going to survive. Somebody asked me yesterday, so who was right? The people who left Hungary or the rabbis who told people to stay in Hungary in 1944, 1943, 42, 41, 40, 39? Who was right? I said, what do I need to choose between two bad options?
Well, where were they supposed to go in 1942?
Well, some of them went to the United States. Some of them, 42 is not a good year. That's why I said 39. Let's say.
X amount of people were even allowed in. There were people.
Yeah. Okay. So they should have come here. They think that, but it doesn't matter because coming here was just another survival instinct. Mm-hmm. It wasn't to finally switch the paradigm. We're not in exile anymore. You have to start thinking with our divine soul, not with our animal soul. That still has to happen.
So is that, I mean, nobody knows, but is that why everything is such a mess? So
right.
The divine
because
soul
we're at the end.
That's
we're at the very end of the animal soul. In the very end, not of the animal soul is going to remain. It just has to
know its place.
Be in the right context, know its place. And I imagine that something of the infrastructure here will remain also. But the whole paradigm of what we're doing here has to change. And the reason that it looks so terrible now and bleak is because this is exactly what Shmuel saw in his time. His life was very short. He passed away at 42. He appointed Shaul when he was 41. And he had 11 years, 2 years of Shaul and 9 years of David, until David became the king. And he passed away just before. David was taken as the king of all of Am Yisrael. And it was a very short life, but in his life he saw the whole transition. So if back then it took 52 years, for this whole transition to happen, today it's going to be like, wow.
Plus there was a Shmuel Hanavi.
No, today it's going to be much quicker.
Oh, you're saying
Much, much quicker, because everything now moves a lot faster. It's not like it used to be back then.
and consciousness is
Consciousness moves, right?
Yeah.
Well, there are people since October 7th. I have friends who their children were not from. Since October 7th, they became from.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, the Frumkut is part of it, but it's not the main thing.
Yeah, but when you start becoming from, you do look at life.
Hopefully, if you meet the right people.
Well, you do look at life in a different way.
There's people that become frum as I don't want to say an animal soul type of frum, but it's to serve the same purpose so that I don't have to think. So that I don't have to worry about what my vision in life is.
So other people, meaning not Chabad, I should say, do they look at the divine soul? Like,
It's a good question. I don't know how to tell you exactly what it is. I know that the Tilumi world looks at it, but not from the point of view of the individual. Not as much. They have some of it. Like in a certain sense, all the kids that go to hilltops, they're this type of person who grew up mostly in the Tilumi world, and they come in and say, and what's the purpose of life? So I don't know if it carries on after the age of 30 and 40. Usually they also settle down. But at least they had a period in which they rebelled against this life is about survival. And they're willing to go and sacrifice something in order to do something greater. There was a period like this in the beginning of the state, but it wasn't before the state, but it wasn't connected to Torah. It was more like like a cultural thing. But it died down very quickly, because very quickly people got comfortable, and so there was no real carryover of this.
it's because your animal soul.
Yeah, because it's very comfortable with the animal soul. It's normal. I don't think you have to worry about your vision every single day, but you definitely have to worry about it at some point, and you have to plan something that.
So in psychology, you have, more in America, where they're calling out self-hating Jews. That's a big term I hear, and where people are like they're pro-Palestine and stuff like that. Are they just that's from their animal soul? Is that
It's survival? In my opinion,
survival?
it's mostly survival. It's mostly fear.
Mhm.
It could be that there are exceptions, but
Why did you say that's? It's kind of harsh what you said about people becoming from, and that some of them are just becoming from so they don't have to worry about their mission. But when someone's becoming religious, that is their mission, at least for the first maybe 20 years. And then maybe they see that then they're from, and now what? I mean, they could become complacent. You're saying they shouldn't become complacent, but to say that people become from and still don't have a mission.
because it leads to complacency.
Hmm?
Because it does lead to complacency.
After a while.
No, right away. It gives you a feeling that everything is already worked out. You don't have to think about anything. You can ask a Rav something, and you'll know exactly what to do, and you don't have to.
Learn all the
That
time.
comfortable. I mean, becoming from is huge, like earthquake shifts in a person.
It is, but it can be a way to run away from things that are worse, where you have no direction and you have no idea. You're tossing around in the wind.
Okay, things were worse. Someone becomes from. They learn about Torah and mitzvahs. Life becomes better. It's exciting. How is that complacency?
Because everything's worked out already. There's no. In the Haredi world, what's the vision?
That's the whole thing about Torah.
No, but what's the vision? What's the vision? What does it want to do? It's exactly sitting under your vine and your fig, except your vine and your fig is Talmud and maybe, Medrash. There's no interest in changing the world. There's no interest in fixing the world. There's no interest in... It simply doesn't exist, of taking any kind of responsibility, even over your neighbors, like their needs. There's very little interest in that.
You mean they don't have derech eretz? They don't.
No, I can't tell a person how to act. But no, they have no greater vision. It's all just, let's continue surviving. It's
I
just
mean, I thought their whole vision. I don't know.
the Haredi world.
about
What's their
these
vision?
People, but their whole thing is that Torah is gonna fix the world.
How?
Right? That their learning Torah keeps the world
No.
spinning.
Their vision
Is
is
that what they think?
that someday a Mashiach will come, and then we'll know what to do.
It depends where you're.
They don't think the Torah itself is going to change anything. They know it doesn't. How does it change something? You sit in a room and you learn.
No, don't be so cavalier.
That's a
No,
reality.
there are people who believe that when you have people who are sitting and learning.
Yeah, but that's not a vision. You can believe that, it's not a vision. Vision is not about belief.
Mhm.
A vision is not belief. Okay, so
I
vision
wanna
is
say
about the
something.
future.
Right?
You're talking about.
You're talking about the present, about something like, okay, this is how I need to live. Okay,
Okay,
settle.
so you're saying.
Not saying it's a bad thing, I'm just saying it has nothing to do with
so
changing.
But you're saying that where does what I'm doing now, what will that lead to in the future?
Right?
So
That's the difference.
I'm planning something. What I'm doing now should be in order to get somewhere. Where am I going? What's my end game? What do I want?
People, especially in our circles that mention Hashem's name and think about Hashem and doing inner work. Where does that stand? And then I was thinking, like, they need to heal. Like, people are so broken today, and really, almost healing has to happen first. Like, how can you
Mhm.
embark on the
Right.
mission when you're just so ravaged by so many
Right?
things?
100%. That's what we said. You have to move from the animal soul to the divine soul.
It's like the pre-step to the...
But I said that you can't heal when you're still in the animal soul. There's no healing
So
there.
that's the transition
Right.
that hopefully...
For the individual, that's the transition. To switch from looking at things from the animal soul,
And that's pivotal. I mean,
right? That's what Shmuel did. He just did it at a grander scale.
So
Does it
that's the
switch
vision.
from looking from my individuality and how I'm feeling to the collective and what's the mission for the collective? I
That
can
could be part of
feeling
it.
Bad, but if my mission is you're moving out of yourself and that's healing. I mean,
Right?
the
That's part of it.
difference I
100%.
see.
Then you're connecting to the divine soul, because the animal soul does not connect to the collective.
Right. Okay.
So that's a vision. If you...
It's a beginning of a vision. It's a beginning of understanding. I said the tool really that we're talking about is that eventually you do build a vision for yourself. That's really the tool that needs to come out of this new light. At the beginning, it's at least that you have a connection to this new light, to looking at things from a different perspective.
So would it be
If I had, like, I don't have to talk. If I had,
So what I was saying, let's say when Bachram and girls, when I was in to help Shluchim, is that a vision or is that the Rebbe?
it's the Rebbe's vision. I don't know if the Shaliach's vision for sure.
Mhm.
Does it carry over to young? I don't yet have my own vision. That's fine.
Right.
But as I
You
grow
also
older,
feel when as a young girl, you feel like you are helping people.
right, 100%. But it's because somebody here has a vision.
Uh-huh.
Somebody here is doing something.
And you have to work on your.
I mean, a lot of the visions are very, you wouldn't tell the difference. There's a guy who, I remember what his name was, Applebaum or something like that was killed in one of the, murdered he started the emergency room at Shari Tzedek. Applebaum. He and his daughter. So here's a guy who had a vision. So what is this? This came from his divine soul. There's no question it came from his divine soul. Even though it's not religious per se. But he sacrificed his life for it. I'm not talking about the fact that he was murdered. I'm talking about the fact that he committed his life to developing emergency medicine in Israel.
Mm.
That's something that is a vision.
But what comes out from the war, like all the chesed and all the
caring and putting energy into.
And so
greater
people for a while
greater
moved up.
That
To,
was a vision.
they moved up, but there's no Shmuel. There's no David. There's nobody who keeps it. There's nobody who comes and says, look, we're shifting the paradigm, period. You can go back to what you want. You're going to be out of touch with what we're doing.
And that's going to be Mashiach.
It doesn't have to be Mashiach. It just be somebody like Shmuel wasn't Mashiach and David wasn't Mashiach. But these shifts in paradigm have to happen. Otherwise you don't survive. Tribal society cannot survive in the Middle East. Which is to our benefit because our neighbors are tribal. But we can't continue to work just on survival. It's just not going to work. Okay, but again, the idea was to come and say that the same shift that happened, that Shmuel did in creating Yerushalayim, is the same shift that we're creating in psychology, as we're trying to do. Is to move, is not to ask, so what better modalities can we work with according to Torah and Nefesh? It's not the question. The question is, how do I shift someone to work with their divine soul? That's the real question. To teach them that they have a higher self, to show them, to explain this to them, to connect them to it, and finally, in the end, to work with it.
Isn't that the mission of Torah?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And then, if you don't have tools, they will come. If you still don't feel that you have tools, it doesn't matter. Because the whole point is, if I connect someone to this source of energy, everything changes. It's just a different life altogether. And I'm not saying they don't have problems. They have all the same problems. But they mean something completely different now.
But how do you know you're looking at your divine soul and not your animal soul?
Because they ask different questions.
But let's say you do something, it does make your life easier, but let's say when you have a child who's not living the life you want them to live,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you say, this is his life, he's over 20, you gave him everything you could give, and you just have to give him love, accept him for who he is, and darling, that he'll change, he'll come to where he was as a bacher or wherever. Is that for my divine soul or is that for my animal soul?
It's close to your divine soul because you're acting like it's from your divine soul, but I'm not sure that the motivation is from the divine soul. The motivation of the divine soul says, bringing a soul down into this world is the goal. Mm-hmm. And if I gave as good a nurturing and loving childhood as I could, I did what I needed to do. And after that, it's the soul's cheshbon with Hashem. It's not mine.
Right. I do.
It's not mine, right? So only the divine soul can say that. Uh-huh. The animal soul cannot say that statement. Because according to the animal soul, you owe me. Because I sacrificed. Look at how much I sacrificed for you.
Look, at every person tries their best when they're raising a child. Did they do everything right?
No, I'm saying that the animal soul of the parent says to the child, you owe me. Because I sacrificed so much. That's how parents who live with the animal soul, and I'm raising children because of that, that's how they see their children. They're bank accounts. I invested in you. Why are you giving me back dividends? Because I'm not you, and I don't owe you anything. It's a scary thought. But the moment you understand that this is part of my mission to bring another soul into the world, then you can come and say also, then who said that I can only do 3? Maybe I can do 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 12 and who knows? All depends on how much Hashem brings down. I don't know. So the whole attitude is different. The whole question is different. Mm-hmm. So what do I do to help my child? If I disown you, then you'll see the light. That only the animal soul would say. The Nefesh Elokis says, no, I need to continue to nurture you in whatever way I can. But in the end, it's your cheshbon with Hashem. It's not mine. I need to think. I need to, think creatively. How do I bring you closer? I spend a lot of hours every week thinking with people in the United States, like how do we get this child to attend the Chabad house and visit here and visit there and all these things. There's all kinds of tricks that we do and things because parents think about it and they're willing to think about it. But those are thoughts of the divine soul. They're not they're not trying to get their children back. They're trying to give them more than what they gave.
To connect their children to their own divine soul.
Right.
And that's
Exactly.
a lifetime's work, huh?
Right? And as many years as I get, so that's as many years as I need. I don't need any more. That's also part of the way the divine soul sees things. And it's constantly in joy. Why is it in joy? Because here, I got an opportunity to work another day. I got another day to do something. The animal soul is, what a terrible day. I didn't get this, I didn't get this, I didn't get this, I didn't get this. It doesn't end.
But it's constant avoda to stay there.
Of course.
To return
Of course.
there. Yeah,
Because you have to identify with it. It's not natural. Because we spend the first 20 years of our lives, even the greatest tzaddik spends the first 20 years of his life identifying with his animal soul.
Well, Rebbe used to talk about gravity.
And what?
Used to talk about gravity, like it's
Uh-huh.
a spring.
Right, right.
We're always like pulled back.
Okay. Because you always return to your default state.
That's why I think it's very important to always continue learning. Because if you don't learn, you're just going to stay, you're going to keep going to your animal.
Right, 100%. That was the main thing. The main tool is learning. The main tool is hisbonenus, is to learn Chassidus and to think about it, and to learn Chassidus, to think about change.
And not to daven and ask Hashem for help and close it.
Yeah, all that, also. But the main tool is learning.
Very open to new things. I mean, the shift is in not like you said, always very healthy, but to now like normal mitzvahs are normal, and God is normal now
Yeah.
more than ever.
Normalize
This
it.
is a
Yeah.
huge thing, first of all,
Mhm.
and then there is new insights coming, like new lights
Right,
coming in.
right,
That,
right.
oh, how come I never saw that before? You know, and we have to be open to that so much. For example, and also like how we function every day, every minute. I was coming out of my car, and this woman was coming with her carriage baby, and she told me like, I can't open the door. Can you move away? And at that moment, the car next to me moved out. I said, oh, no problem. And when this happened, I said to her, and she's not from. I said to her, I think this is what we call hashgacha prati. She goes, oh, like to bring this in the awareness of our environment constantly, to constantly bring this in, you know,
Mhm.
to find these moments. And our children were not food sometimes are even better because they have something that they see something that we don't. They're even ahead of us. I was thinking of the sort of the Baal Shem Tov, who saw a decree and nothing could help until he got all the gangsters, you know the story, all the robbers
Thieves?
on the minyan, and
Yeah,
told
yeah.
them, you're gonna daven, and because you know how to open doors.
Pick locks, yeah.
Okay, so I see this happen with people who are not frum. That's what it is. They see things that we don't, and they scream out because they suffer from not having the God. Like, we daven and it's delicious. So like, yeah, you know, but they do, and they scream for the soul, and that's what will bring Mashiach, because they can't take it anymore. How come there's so much suffering? You know, blessing. You know, Baruch Hashem, you know, there's miracles. But they say, no, there's too much now. There's too much.
Mhm.
September, October 7th, whatever, there's too much now. They are saying that. We don't. We keep saying that. Baruch Hashem.
Because we're used to suffering. They thought they would get away from suffering. That was the whole point that they built this state. But then it turns out that that's now.
In the beginning, they
Okay,
wanted to
it's
be
for survival. That's all
Well,
it is.
also, and they didn't want it to be
From.
a from.
Of course, because that's the whole problem. That's why we were persecuted. So if you take that out of the equation, we're not going to be persecuted. Who's going to care about us?
At the time the state in 1948, surviving was a big deal.
Of course, but it's still a big deal.
So it's still a big deal.
Nothing changed.
So survival.
That's the whole point. That's what I said. That somebody who chose to stay in Hungary, and somebody who chose to come here in 1938, let's say, it's the same choice. It's just a question of time. In the end, it's the same choice still, because in both places it's about surviving. It's not about switching paradigms to the divine soul and to asking, how do I come out of Gullus? That's not the question. This is Gullus. It's just a more homogeneous Gullus. It's more than in most places, although there were places in Warsaw, I think. It was like 2/3 Jewish and 1/3 non-Jewish before the war. So there were places that were just as homogeneous. Anyway, okay, so we'll end here.
We didn't talk about Shavuos. Maybe a few sentences.
In few sentences, the idea was to say that Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron also switched paradigms. That the paradigm until then was what we call the paradigm of the Avos. And to be like the Avos, to be like the patriarchs, you had to be at a very high spiritual level. And the problem was that it didn't fit everyone. Most people didn't know how to serve Hashem. So it got lost. And what Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron did, they didn't do it themselves, obviously Hashem gave them the tools, was first of all, they switched the paradigm. Instead of me serving Hashem from below to above, meaning I awaken to serve Hashem, now it's going to become that Hashem comes down to me. He's going to come down on Mount Sinai. He's going to give me the Torah, and He's going to command me what to do. He's going to tell me what to do. So it's a very comfortable situation now. Every person now knows how to serve Hashem. He doesn't have to be of the stature of the patriarchs. He knows exactly what to do. He does more, does less, that's a different question. But now everybody knows. That was also a paradigm shift that was absolutely necessary. Because otherwise the whole path of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov would have been completely lost. That's what we mean when we say that they were in 49 gates of defilement. We don't mean, there wasn't Torah, so what do you mean exactly they were defiled, they were impure? In what way? There wasn't Torah yet. They were defiled and impure because they could not remember anymore the path of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. There was no memory even of what it meant to serve Hashem like the Avos did. And so Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron, they took them out, and Miriam, when they took them out, they gave them, one would say something like top-bottom approach on how to reach those things that Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov had. To reach that, it's a paradigm shift, and it worked it's still here. I mean, it's still working for us.
But the danger is getting comfortable and not losing.
And there too, you can become comfortable, and you become just like we said. We call this like religious consciousness, that I have to only follow what the Torah says, and the Torah is a minimum. It was just to make it accessible to everyone. But on top of the Torah, you have to do something much, much more. And you should be like the Avos, and the sages say this. They say, every person should say, when will my actions reach the level of the actions of my forefathers? I'm supposed to try to reach that. What I have is just a minimum to keep me afloat.
What? That last sentence. What?
The whole halacha is just the minimum to keep me afloat. It's not Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. It's just so that I don't fall down into gates of defilement, but that I have a chance to ascend and be like Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov.
But then Yeridat Hadorot, like that was inevitable, or
Okay, it's built in. That when Hashem came down, so that gave all the strength of being commanded. The Yeridat Hadorot means that we don't feel as commanded as they did. Every generation feels less of the command, because even though God's word is very powerful, it was an experience that gave them God's word, and that experience over time fades.
Okay, I must still be in kindergarten. I mean, We do Torah and mitzvahs to make a dwelling place for Hashem in this world.
No, obviously that's part of it.
You're saying this is the minimum?
It's the minimum needed in order to make a dwelling place.
The minimum needed, not for my survival, but to make a dwelling place for
Yeah,
Hashem.
the minimum, but it's not yet what I really could do. Could do a lot
What
more.
I individually.
And as a people also, both of them.
Okay, but this I.
You can build a small, let's look at, say it like this. There's people who feel that building the Beis HaMikdash is a very important national project. You got this guy Feiglin and all the people that go up the Temple Mount, and what do they feel? They feel that this is to poke the eyes out of the Muslims, right? Okay, but that's a minimum. Meaning, you'll build a Beis HaMikdash like that. I'm not saying it's not Beis HaMikdash, it is. But it certainly doesn't serve the real purpose, the higher purpose, which is to unite the entire world. Because if you're poking people's eyes out to get there, they're probably not going to come. They're not going to see it very fondly. So you can think about things minimally. You can build a small version of Beis HaMikdash, which just takes care of, let's say, of your needs. But you don't see the bigger picture, so it doesn't take care of... The same thing can be with Torah and mitzvahs also. A person can lead a very beautiful life, but not see anything beyond their fig and vine. That's all they see.
But isn't
Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov saw the big picture.
Isn't the Beis HaMikdash supposed to be rebuilt when Mashiach comes? We're not supposed to build it.
Settle, but these people want to do it, so their argument is, but we need it now to, like in Shmuel's time. In Shmuel's time, there was nobody there, so it wasn't poking anyone's eye out. And it was used, first of all, to unite the people, to create the paradigm shift. Slowly, as they thought about it more and more, they realized this needs to be something much more than just something that unifies us. It's something that needs to bring out Hashem's presence to the entire world. So they began. So it went through many stages of being built. Also, I mean, it started off as a small shack, especially in the second temple, but also in the first one, which Shlomo built was not what the final structure was. They didn't wait. They needed to have something to work with. So they built, and it took 7 years until they finally finished the structure they wanted. Then they continued building it all the way through the first temple period.
So how come it only lasted 27 years?
No, the unity only lasted for 26 years.
The unity of the Beis HaMikdash.
Of the tribes. And then it split into 2 kingdoms, but it never went back to tribalism.
But this was after the Beis HaMikdash.
26 years after. Right.
But psychologically, were the people like, as you're describing, they had the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, that they were more in touch with the divine soul? That they had
Yes, because a lot of people came to the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, and there they got their prophecy. And that's when we begin to have this whole thing of 600,000 prophets and prophetesses.
So it carried
Of course,
through.
it carried.
Yeah.
But it
So why did
wasn't
that
able
last?
to,
Like what?
because there were political problems. The political problems didn't, and in the end, they also succumbed to their idolatrous practices. Which means basically that, so I don't want to talk about it, it's a whole other discussion, but it means that I want to be like the nations. That's basically what it means.
That old song.
I want to serve what they serve. I want to pursue what they pursue.
Comfortable, right? It's like another
It seems to work for them, so you want to be like them. Which,
It's kind of like easier,
yeah, I mean, they built New York, so why would I want to?
You fit, you belong.
It was always the feeling here. It was very scary every time I heard this from American Jews coming to Tel Aviv, let's say, not Jerusalem. Jerusalem, they felt it was special because, I don't know, some feeling they had. But Tel Aviv, they didn't think was special. So you say, why wouldn't somebody want to live here when you can live in Brooklyn or in Queens or in Manhattan, or in New Jersey even? That's a city. That's type of avodah zarah. It's a type of. It's not. I'm not saying that.
But I don't think they're doing it. I can say this, like people my children's age who live in America, they don't want to come to Eretz Yisrael because they know in America that they can support their family. Even though like yeshivas are expensive and everything, life is very expensive.
You'll get no argument from me. I'm not against
it's not
it.
because they don't have this pull to come to Eretz Yisrael.
No,
They
it's not
think
a-
New York is better. They know. Like my son, he got laid off from his job, and next morning he had another job.
Okay.
He started the next day.
So I have no problem with it.
You know.
I'm just saying what say here, and they look at that and they say, "Oh, that's so much better."
No, Israelis think that America's better.
Right.
My niece.
So that's the same thing as idolatry.
My niece is like.
Somehow that system works better.
My niece only wanted to live in America, and if she would have her way, today, she's been there maybe 6-7 years. I don't remember when they came. No, more than 7 years. But they got married last summer, and she wants to move back here. My nephew doesn't. He's very nervous. Not because he doesn't want to live in Israel. He's just very nervous. Can't make a living. He doesn't speak Hebrew.
Well,
He doesn't have any kind of professional job. But in like Jewish communities in America that grew up, people watch out for you.
Okay. Could be. I don't know.
My nephew.
I've never lived there enough to.
No, but that was my son. He got a job because people know my son. They know who he is, and that's how he got a job. My nephew also, and he's not even real big in the community, and he got a job.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? You said the base of Mikdash is to unite the entire world.
Right.
So in the first base of Mikdash, you said it didn't last because there were political problems. Well, there's supposed to be a government that rules over us. So I mean, the base of Mikdash didn't work essentially. You're saying it was built and it didn't work.
No, the
So-
base of Mikdash is like the embassy.
Try going to the American embassy. It's so much fun.
But doesn't it channel Hashem's energy also?
It does. So people at some level had visions, they had prophecy, but they couldn't find a leader who could unite them. That's why they missed David. That's why we keep missing David so much. Because you still need someone who knows how to work with completely different people.
And after David, then it all started to fall apart,
Right.
and then it separated into the two kingdoms.
Right. It doesn't necessarily mean that it fell apart. It just means that it couldn't function as a single unit. It had to function as two different units. Some of the time they worked together, some of the time they didn't work together.
That's very sad. That's why we break a glass at every hasana, huh? For this reason.
Yeah. In the end, you still need a very talented politician to hold things together. You still need
That's
that.
really bad. There are no politicians in the world anymore that are really
A statesman, not a politician. Politician's
And
terrible.
everything worked fine. Like each generation, each period, we just did what we had to do.